There's a reason, sir, why we dare not enter that house now. For when your son bought it, and we began to live there, we hadn't been there long before one of our people took a nap in a haunted room. In his sleep, he saw a dead man, all covered in chains, standing over him. This ghost told him that long ago he had been murdered by a guest in that house, and his gold had been buried there. He asked that the house be given up to him so that he could dwell there in peace. For as long as it was occupied, he would let no one live there without fear. Because of this, sir, we've all left the house.
This was the first time that the word ghost appeared in human history. It is part of Mostellaria, a play by the Roman author Plautus. Today we will watch 3 of my favorite Poltergeist stories. In the 1850s, on New Orleans Royal Street, a beautiful octoroon woman named Julie fell deeply in love with a wealthy Frenchman. Despite their passionate love affair, societal norms prevented them from openly being together. Julie longed for marriage, but the Frenchman repeatedly refused due to her lower social standing. One cold December night, the Frenchman, frustrated by Julie's pleas for marriage, devised a cruel test to prove her love. He asked her to undress and wait for him on the rooftop while he entertained guests, assuming she would not take the request seriously. But Julie, desperate to prove her love, did as he asked. Hours later, the Frenchman realized Julie was missing and rushed to the rooftop, where he found her frozen body. She had waited for him in the cold until it claimed her life. Devastated by guilt and grief, the Frenchman fell into a deep depression, dying a few months later from a broken heart. Years after Julie's tragic death, the house on Royal Street remained, filled with an eerie atmosphere. Visitors and passers-by often reported a chilling presence, especially on cold, dark nights. One evening, a guest staying in the house felt increasingly uneasy as midnight approached. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, and a shadowy figure appeared, a woman shivering in the darkness, clutching herself against the cold. The visitor, frozen in fear, watched as the ghostly figure moved toward the window, only to vanish, leaving behind a soft, mournful sigh. Realizing the figure was the spirit of Julie, still waiting for her lost love, the visitor fled the next morning, haunted by the encounter. To this day, it is said that on cold winter nights, Julie's ghost can still be seen on Royal Street, eternally waiting for the lover who never returned. In 1967, a law office in Rosenheim, Germany, became the epicenter of the mysterious and terrifying events now known as the Rosenheim Poltergeist case. It all began with strange electrical malfunctions, flickering lights and incessantly ringing phones with no caller, escalating to unexplained phenomena such as heavy objects moving on their own, pictures swinging violently, and loud, unexplained banging noises throughout the office. Despite thorough investigations by police, utility companies, and even parapsychologists, no logical explanation could be found. The disturbances seemed to revolve around a young clerk, Annemarie Schneider, leading some to speculate she might be unknowingly causing the activity. The case garnered international attention and remains one of the most documented and mysterious poltergeist cases of the 20th century, with no definitive cause ever determined. One late afternoon, as the Rosenheim Law Office wound down for the day, the atmosphere grew tense with anticipation of the now familiar disturbances. Annemarie Schneider, a young clerk, was typing at her desk when the lights began to flicker more violently than ever before. Suddenly, All the office phones rang out simultaneously in a deafening chorus. An attorney, watching in horror, saw a large framed picture on the wall begin to sway, growing more intense until it was nearly perpendicular. Without warning, the picture flew off the wall, crashing to the ground and shattering glass across the floor. As everyone stood frozen in terror, Anne-Marie's typewriter slid across the desk and fell to the floor, followed by loud, unexplainable banging noises as if unseen hands were pounding on the walls. The chaos culminated in the overhead lights exploding, plunging the office into darkness. Terrified, the staff fled the building, refusing to return until daylight. This encounter became one of the most terrifying moments in the Rosenheim Poltergeist case, further cementing its place as one of the most chilling paranormal events in modern history. The Ammons haunting, also known as the Gary, Indiana Demon House case, is one of the most well-known and controversial hauntings in recent history. In 2011, LaToya Ammons and her family moved into a rental house in Gary, Indiana, where they soon began experiencing disturbing and inexplicable phenomena. The family reported strange occurrences, including swarms of flies that appeared in winter, creaking footsteps in the basement, and wet footprints on the floors. Over time, the situation escalated into terrifying episodes, where LaToya's 3 children exhibited bizarre behavior, including levitation, convulsions, and speaking in strange, deep voices. One of the most chilling events during the Ammons haunting occurred at a local hospital in Gary, Indiana, where LaToya Ammons had taken her 9-year-old son for evaluation. The boy had been exhibiting increasingly bizarre and violent behavior, prompting concern from both LaToya and medical professionals. As doctors and nurses examined him, the boy suddenly began to growl and speak in a deep, unnatural voice, a stark contrast to his usual tone. Then, in front of several witnesses, including medical staff and a DCS caseworker, the boy's eyes rolled back into his head, and he started to convulse. The room fell silent as the boy, seemingly in a trance, slowly turned his head toward his grandmother, who was also present, and gave her a chilling smile. Without warning, he walked backward up the wall, his feet defying gravity as he reached the ceiling before flipping over and landing on his feet. Everyone in the room was left stunned and horrified. The DCS caseworker, who had been skeptical of the family's claims until that moment, fled the room in fear, later stating that it was the most terrifying thing she had ever witnessed. Medical staff were equally shaken, unable to provide any logical explanation for what they had just seen.